Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right. I know you guys have been waiting for this ever since Joe Shane and Brian Daboll were announced as returning to the New York Giants. I know you've been waiting for the Ed and Patty Traina take on all things Giants and all of that. So Patty is here with us today, and thank you, Patty, for hopping on, and we'll go through this nonsense with the Giants, I guess, and see if we can come up with all of the answers and fix the problems and get the Giants their fifth Super Bowl trophy by next year.
And I just realized something. You and I just taped my show, and we didn't engage in the usual banter.
I'm taking care of that now, Patty. I'm
Oh my
fixing.
God, I am off my game today. I'm telling you.
I'm fixing that now. We're
Okay,
all right.
all
We're
right.
we're taking we're taking care of that now, and you still haven't fixed the darn sign, Patty. You still haven't fixed the sign.
I got to get hold of the woodworking guy.
You've been telling me that for months, Patty.
I know. Well,
You're
listen, I have more
you're
important things to do than to
you're
worry about a sign.
I don't know. You're losing your touch.
I
Nobody
must be.
nobody's listening to you anymore. Nobody's paying attention. I don't know. Nobody's doing
I
what you
know.
tell
Even
them to
my
do.
dog doesn't listen to me anymore. That's sad.
Yeah, and you haven't had the dog that long. Jeez.
Oh, she
Uh,
comes in. She gives me a speech. She demands when it's time to cuddle and stop working, and when she wants her cookie, and when I tell her stop and stuff, she just looks at me
uh,
like, "Huh? Who's the boss
see,
here?"
the dog is, Patty.
Of course,
You
of
know
course,
that the dog
of course
is.
I do.
The dog is. So anyway, Patty, let's talk Giants. Let's talk Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. Um, and I don't necessarily want to talk about whether you agreed with the decision or not. But let's spin it this way. When you look at the last couple of years, when you look at where the Giants are, um, when you look at John Mara's sort of wishy-washy explanation for why he kept, both guys in their jobs, can this work? Can this work with these two guys, continuing to try to build this?
I sure hope so, Ed. I really do. I mean, if I had to let me put it this way. We're gonna find out a lot about Joe Shane and Brian Dable because the heat under their seats is broiling right now, and we haven't even gotten to 2025 in any games.
Mhm.
Pressure is on them. They have got to get this thing going in the right direction. Now, sometimes when you turn up the heat under somebody's chair, they respond, they come out swinging, and they find success. Sometimes they don't. They cave and they melt. We're going to find out a lot about the plan that Shane and Dable presented to ownership that convinced them to keep their jobs. We're going to find out if they are willing to change some of their ways that have not worked. And, at the end of the day, for everybody's sanity, the fans, the media, for John Mara's sanity, the season ticket holders, whoever, I hope it works because if it doesn't, then we just basically have wasted a year where, you've wasted a year of Brian Burns' career, Andrew Thomas's, Dexter Lawrence's, and it's just a vicious cycle that has developed that they just haven't been able to snap out of. And I just hope that they snap out of it this year.
Right, and I understood the fact that the Giants have made so many changes over the years that they eventually had to put their marker down on somebody and say, let's ride with it and see how it goes. Um, and here's my question for you. They kept both the GM, they kept Joe, they kept Brian. But there was a lot of chatter, by the end of the season that ownership looked at those guys separately. Do you still see them as a duo the way that we saw them when they came into the job in 2022? And let's just imagine that it goes badly in 2025. Is it a circumstance in your mind where it's still both guys have to go, or the coach goes, the GM stays and gets another opportunity to find a head coach? There have been a lot of examples over the years of GMs who struggled in their first 4 or 5 years in a job, find the right head coach, find the right quarterback along the way, and turn things around. So is it still a case for you where you think they're a duo, or do we need to start looking at them as separate entities?
I've always thought, I mean, I understand the logic that would say they're a team because they do need to be hand in hand, so to speak, with the major decisions like who's going to be the quarterback, who's going to get this, which free agents are we going to bring in, who are we going to draft, all that stuff. But that said, there's also a divide. And nobody's going to convince me because I know this for a fact that the two of them agree on every single way that this organization is built or the way they do things. I know that for a fact that there are disagreements. The question is, can they overcome those disagreements and reach a middle ground? With that said, I never really liked the whole concept of they're a pair because they're two different individuals. They have different personalities. They have different responsibilities. At the end of the day, yes, they all have to, it's all for the common good of the franchise, whatever decision they make. But sometimes you might have, and I go back and I think of George Young and Bill Parcells. A lot of people said, oh, the two of them were responsible. They were a pair. They really weren't, but they were, if you know what I
They
mean. Because
it
Parcells, remember, he used to complain about, oh, if I'm going to cook the meal, I should be allowed to shop for the ingredients. And it didn't work that way. So I think with Dable and Shane, it's a yes and a no answer. They are a pair because they both have the same common goal, which is to win, but they're not in that, how they do their respective jobs kind of influences how the other guy does his job, if that makes any sense.
No, they have different responsibilities. And push comes to shove, one is the boss. Push
Right.
comes to shove, one is the final decision maker. So there is, I guess there does have to be somewhat of a divide.
Yeah.
Um, Patty, let's talk about things that need to change. Okay. Obviously, 9-7, 9-7-1, win a playoff game. Then you go 6-11. Then you go 3-14, and things appear to be getting worse instead of better. Some things about the way that the Giants operate have to change. For you, whether it's Brian Daboll, whether it's Joe Shane, whether it's something completely unrelated to that, whether it's both, is there, and priority one, of course, is getting the quarterback. But is there one thing about the way that the Giants do business? Is there one thing for you that really needs to change to help this team go forward?
I think people management needs to improve by both guys. And I'll start with Shane. I I've always gotten the impression, and maybe I'm wrong here, but this is just my impression, that Joe and kind of views himself and Brian as partners on equal ground. In the structure of the organization, the GM is higher than the head coach. And I think there have been times when maybe Joe has been a little too lenient with Brian in terms of speaking up and, say, hey, Brian, look, dude, I don't like the way you're doling out preseason snaps. You really need to do this, this, and this. It's maybe like, "Hey, Brian, look, I'm not sure about this, so why don't you think about this?" Instead of telling him and being his boss, which is, his right, I always got the impression that maybe Joe was, okay, we're equal. We're not, like this, where I'm above
Mhm.
you. And that could, that I think needs to change. I know it's difficult to do and you don't want to, pull a power play, but if you both have the same goal, sometimes you've got to be the hard ass, if you will.
Well,
That-
you've got to be willing to call out what you
Exactly.
see as a mistake. And
Exactly.
I know, as I think you know, um, John Mara the other day talked about the play calling situation. And we know how much Brian Daboll loves offense, and we know how many times he's been an offensive coordinator and all of those things. But we both know, because Joe has said it in public, Joe doesn't want the head coach calling plays.
Right.
But Joe has not been willing to basically slam the gavel and say, Brian, you are not calling the offensive plays. That
Right.
may be an area where Joe and John, have to say, you need to coach the football team. You need
Hmm.
to coach everything, and and not do that. I saw a really interesting stat the other day about that. I think from Zach Berman, who covers the Eagles. The great majority of teams in the playoffs have head coaches who do not call plays on either side of the ball.
Right.
So that's always been my preference, is the head
Mine
coach
too.
needs to be the head coach.
Mine
Um,
too.
but yeah, but so you're, I tend to agree with you there. I think the GM needs to be the GM, the head coach needs to be the head coach, and there does need to be a line of authority there. I do think you go back to the Jerry Reese, Tom Coughlin era, and I do think part of the GM's job is to make sure he's giving the head coach what the head coach and the coaching staff need, instead of what the GM wants them to have.
Right.
So there does need to be good communication there, but I do think at times the GM needs to be willing to say, this decision is mine and this is how you're going to do it.
Exactly. And look, I think Joe does make a good effort to give Brian what he needs. He talks about, hey, we're going to meet with this new coordinator last year when Shane Bowen came in. We're going to get with Shane, find out what he needs. And I think they do a better job of that maybe than what Jerry Reese did towards the end of his tenure. But there has to be more of a divide here because I think, like I said, the two guys, for whatever the reason, because they came in, they're good friends, their wives are friendly. It's almost like Joe has come down to, hey, Brian and I are on the same level, and they're really not. That has to change. And Brian, also we talk about changes. Brian, while I can appreciate him not wanting to publicly call somebody out, sometimes you've got to, there's the old saying, action speaks louder than words. So if a player is not, performing, if a player is making the same stupid mistake time and time again, all right, you take him off the field, you bench him. Do you remember when DeMontre Moore was on the team and he committed a stupid personal foul and Tom Coughlin yanked him off the field? And then he sent the message. Do you remember, going back even further, Jim Fossil made an example of Bashir Livingston after, the team was struggling and whatnot. Sometimes you've got to do that. I know it's not the most pleasant thing in the world, and
Here's
but you can't be these players' friends. You've got to be
no.
their coach. You've got to be their mentor, their teacher, but you also have to be a disciplinarian to a degree. And I don't know that Brian, at least the impression I get, now maybe behind closed doors, he's totally different, but I don't get that sense that he lowers the boom when he really needs to. And don't tell me, oh, well, he can find a guy. To most of these guys, that's pocket change and it
Right.
doesn't move the needle.
It's interesting, Patty, because as you were talking about that, I was thinking about a game earlier this season, and you hate to make an example out of an end of the roster guy. But when you do make an example out of out of an end of the roster guy that sometimes resonates throughout the room. And wasn't there a game during the season where Toman Fox, who was up off the practice squad, I think, committed a pair of personal foul penalties? There are coaches who would have either banished Toman Fox back to the practice squad, never to be elevated again, or simply cut the guy.
Mhm.
And that never happened. And at the end of the year, Toman Fox was playing like nothing ever happened. And I guess that's the kind of situation I'm thinking about where, where was the accountability?
Exactly.
Where was the accountability? It took when I think about the Deontay Banks situation. The Deontay Banks situation, I thought was handled weirdly,
Yeah.
okay, with the effort situation, because tell me if you think I'm right here. They went through the two examples or the two situations in games where his effort came into question, and nothing was really said, nothing was really done. I mean, Jerome Henderson sort of called him out, was the only one who really called him out publicly. But then comes the Pittsburgh Steelers game, and Deontay Banks was sort of weirdly benched for an unexplainable reason. And I don't know what I thought that was Brian Daboll sort of retroactively realizing that he had screwed up and finding a way to try to fix it. And I didn't like that.
I didn't either.
I do think Brian needs to really look at, is he properly holding players accountable? Is he sending them the right message? Or is he afraid to step on toes?
Yeah,
And is that the right way to coach the football team?
it's not. I mean, look, I get it. You want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but you're watching these guys in practice all week. If you can't tell that, oh, a guy isn't practicing up to snuff, it should have never gotten to where it got with Deontay Banks in the Pittsburgh game. That should have been addressed right off the bat. The minute you don't address that, now you leave yourself open to, oh, okay, the coach didn't do anything. So, if I
Yeah,
if I get frustrated, I'll do it again. Now who's running the team? The
right,
inmates, who's running
right.
now the inmates are running the asylum. And that's where you could say, well, that at times maybe Abel lost a little bit of a grip on the locker room. I don't think he totally lost the locker room. I want to make that clear. But when you allow bad behavior to continue and you don't hold guys accountable, that becomes a problem. And that's something that I would like to see, fixed. Now, I'm not saying again that he should get up there and he should say, my God, Deontay Banks stinks. He's the worst things, to ever happen. Don't go crazy like that. But it's okay to say, look, we expect better from him. We know he is capable of doing better. We will talk to him. We will work with him to get him to do better. At least acknowledge it because you owe your fans that much, as opposed to just sweep it under the rug and pretend like nothing happened.
The other example I'm thinking of, Patty, is Malik Neighbors in I don't even remember what game it was, but Daniel Jones had a poor game. The Giants got beaten, and after the game, Malik Neighbors says, basically, he says, I was open. I was open. So basically, he's saying, I was open. So don't look at me for why this happened.
Yeah.
And and Daboll's response to that was, well, he was open. And my issue with that is maybe Neighbors is right. Maybe
Yeah.
Daboll is right. But what you just publicly did was absolve yourself of any blame and throw your quarterback under the bus.
Right.
And that's where what you want the head coach to say is, you know, he's a young kid. We're going to talk about what he said. That's not the right thing to say. We want to, we want we want our players to support each other. Um, and we're going to talk about that behind closed doors. You
Right.
know, um, just acknowledge the fact that you can't have players throwing the quarterback under the bus, because when you're saying, well, he was open, you're also throwing your quarterback under the bus.
Right.
And you don't want that's not the right way. That's not the right message to send the locker room, in my view.
Exactly. I mean, I would have rather in that case he had said, well, I want to look at it again. Was the protection there? Did the quarterback miss something? Did Malik run the wrong route? Just I agree with you. It's a balancing act, but I would have allowed that to happen. I would have said, "Hey, Malik, look, I get it. You're frustrated. We're all frustrated, but we can't be talking like this. We just
Right.
can't be airing this kind of laundry. Let's talk about it behind closed doors. Figure out how to fix it moving forward instead of complaining about it."
Right. And that's not me, that's not me trying to pick on Malik Neighbors. It's just an example that came to mind. I mean, I'll be honest. Um, I have, after what I watched Malik Neighbors do this year, I had questions about Malik Neighbors, whether the personality would work and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, but Patty, I have so much respect for that kid. Just, if you've been in the locker room like I have, and you've seen that kid drag himself from his locker to the shower, and you've seen that kid, that kid was not physically anywhere near 100% for so much of the season, and he dealt with so many things, and he played through them, just like Brian Burns did. So I have so much respect for how hard the kid plays.
Right.
But it's just a matter of, as a head coach, you have to make sure that all of your players, you can't have it's a 53 man thing, and you can't have one guy saying, this is not my fault,
Right.
you
I agree.
know.
I
Mhm.
agree. You win as a team, you lose as a team. And when you start kind of pointing fingers, which
Mhm.
you did, you're not
Mhm.
helping the situation. And, you know, look, he's a young kid. Hopefully, somebody pulls him aside and talks to him about that. But you can't have that. You just can't.
Mhm. So let's look at, we can talk about quarterback, we can talk about a lot of things. Patty, what are there other changes, staff changes, the way Giants do things, other changes that that you feel need to get made, or that would really help this team going forward?
Well, I think the first thing they've got to do is, and I've been screaming about this, starting with Joe, the positional value thing. We talked about it a little bit on my show. You can't, you've got to look at the person and the impact, because sometimes, you can't just apply a one size fits all to every situation. So that would be like maybe the first area I would start. From a coaching perspective, something I've been screaming about is how they get these guys ready for the preseason games. All right. This whole concept of, oh, we had a joint practice with the Lions for 2 days, so we don't have to play the starters. Hi, you just came off your worst season in your team history. You are not a defending Super Bowl champion. Get your team as much work as possible. I get it. Everybody's like, oh, what about injuries? Injuries are going to happen. How many times this past season did we see injuries pop up, guys pop up on the injury report, working on the grass, for heaven's sake? Okay, not even working on the turf, but working on the grass. So injuries are just going to happen. Now, speaking of injuries, you know, I think just going back a minute to Joe, a lot of people say, well, the Giants are injured and it's a problem, and Ronnie Barnes and all this stuff. I think a big problem with that is also depth. And sometimes, they don't have enough depth at key positions that are more likely to be injured. So, for example, offensive line, that they didn't draft offensive linemen this past year, or last year, I should say, blew my mind. Why would you not want to have young guys in the pipeline to develop and have ready? Same thing with the defensive line. I just don't understand that. So I think, people talk about injuries, and yes, it's a problem. But if you have adequate depth on your roster at the positions that maybe your studies will show are more likely to get injured, sometimes you can overcome those.
It's very interesting, Patty, because we talk about depth and we talk about offensive line and defensive line, and you look at Joe's 2024 draft class, and you look at it and you can call each one of those players a hit, which is highly unusual. That just doesn't happen where you draft 6 guys and you can look at all 6 guys and say, "You know what? We drafted 6 good players." 6 guys that are going to be at varying levels, but they're all useful players on an NFL roster. They're all guys who add things to an NFL roster. The problem sometimes becomes what Joe didn't do. And
Right.
you can and I say this all the time. You can't fix every problem in one off season. You just can't. You can't plug every hole. But the the issue that I have is sometimes you can look at holes and you can see, like, the offensive line, like you pointed out, like the defensive line where they traded away Leonard Williams and lost Ashawn Robinson in free agency and did nothing to add to that group. There are spots where there was no effort made to add to those rooms, and I guess that's where I have a problem.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You can't fix everything in an off season, but you have to go into it with eyes wide open.
Mhm.
And, look, Andre Patterson, I think we could both agree, is an outstanding coach. You look at what he was able to do with Elijah Garcia and Elijah Chapman and those guys. They didn't do too badly, all things considered. Carmen Priscillo is a good coach, I think, for the
Mhm.
offensive line. He was able to despite the fact that that unit went through 10 different combinations, that unit played a lot better than it did last year. And this is without Andrew Thomas. So, coaching, yes, it will take you so far, but you also have to have the talent with which to work. And if you're basically, not giving a guy enough talent to work with or quality talent to develop, then that's not on the coach.
No, it's dereliction of duty in a way, Patty. You have to build from inside out. Yes, you got to get the quarterback. You've got to get all of those things, but you have to build a football team from the lines out. You just have to. And I think for me that's been a failing of Joe over the last couple of years. Hopefully he changes it. Hopefully he looks himself in the mirror and realizes that that has to change, but for me that's been a failing.
Yeah, exactly. And Ed, can I just say one quick thing? And I wanted to say this at the beginning of the show, if I could, real quick.
Mhm.
I just want to send a shout out to the people of the Los Angeles area who are being affected by the wildfires. We're sitting here, we're talking about football and complaints and whatnot. Those people out there, please be safe, everybody. We're thinking about you. I think I could speak for Ed on this. We're thinking about you. It's a scary situation. I've been looking at some of the videos and I'm like, oh my gosh. Hopefully, the first responders who are doing a heck of a job and who I think we don't appreciate the first responders enough. And, keep them safe And I just hope they get that situation under control because I know I've got some friends out in LA. I've got some subscribers and readers out in LA, and I just hope everybody is safe and, that they can recover from this.
Absolutely, Patty. Thank you for mentioning that. There are things in life that are more important than football. There
Mhm.
are things in life that are more important than who the general manager and head coach of the New York Giants are, and all of that. And thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. I just wanted to put that out there and,
Hmm.
'cause we get
Yeah,
so caught up in what we're doing and there's bigger things going on in the world, and that right now is really, it's
absolutely,
terrible. I
absolutely.
think we'll come out of that okay and stronger.
Absolutely. Patty, I think perhaps that is maybe a good spot for us to call it a day instead of going back and talking about more football, which
Yeah.
which we could, but I
Yeah.
think we'll call it a day right there. Thank you so much for hopping on. And folks, check out Patty's show, Locked On Giants. I'll be over there as well. You running that show on Friday, Patty?
Yes.
All right. So my appearance over there will be up on Friday. So if you're not tired of looking at our beautiful faces, from having done this show, hop on over there and check that out as well. And as always, Giants fans, thank you for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon.